So generally, people think about sustainability as a cost. Maybe it's a cost that pays off in the long run. But how do you at your organizations think about how to turn doing good into doing well in terms of traditional business metrics? Jean, let's start with you.
Absolutely. Well, it's wonderful to be here with all of you. So thank you, Katherine, for that question. For us at Hilton, when you think about a hotel, once the doors of a hotel open, they never close. They're open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, every day of the year. So when you think about the energy, the lights being on, the air conditioning that's running, the showers that are being taken, that's a lot of utility costs that are adding up. So for us, we are doing well and doing good by operating with efficiency, which translates into strong financial performance. So that's really fundamental.
And Jean, obviously, Hilton is a large corporation. You have a number of hotels, kind of a franchise-based model. How do you make sure that every hotel is efficient?
Well, it's a challenge in our franchise business model. When you see a Hilton or any of our 24 brands across our 8,400 hotels in 140 countries with 500,000 team members, having consistency everywhere is an ongoing opportunity. But what we have is the backbone of our data tracking platform is called LightStay. And our LightStay platform is required, whether you're a managed hotel or a franchised hotel, every hotel across our ecosystem is required to report in energy, water, waste, and social impact. So volunteerism, donations. And that's really the backbone for our internal reporting and for our external reporting. It's also the backbone of our customer reporting. You may not know that over half of our business is driven through business travel and group travel. And many of our corporate customers have ambitious goals of their own. So that platform provides our own reporting. It provides the reporting for our customers. So in terms of consistency between our LightStay platform and then also maybe we'll talk about this a little bit more, but through certifications, we adhere to ISO certifications. So at any given moment, we have auditors at a number of our hotels all around the world, and they have very rigorous criteria that we provide of things to be looking for that we are delivering consistently across our Travel with Purpose program, which is our strategy to drive responsible travel and tourism. And all of those key components enable us to scale our efforts and drive more consistent practices.
John, let's come to you next, because obviously, as McDonald's Corporation, you have a similar sort of challenge to Jean's. How do you think about this issue?
Well, I guess let me start at 30,000 feet for a second, because I've just spent 2 days at the Sustainable Markets Initiative, which is very relevant in the UK, which then Prince Charles had organized 5 years ago, and it's the 5th anniversary. And those 2 days together was fantastic innovation and inspiration. We saw lots of startups who were figuring out new ways to capture carbon, to measure carbon, to do nitrate-free fertilizer and carbon-free fertilizer. And I think there was great hope coming out of that meeting. In that context, on the other hand, you have Jürgen and Orzag's piece in Foreign Affairs, for those of you who haven't read it. It's titled The Troubled Transition. And I think in there they talk about how we're going in the wrong direction in terms of carbon emissions. And they estimate that we should have been on our way towards 20 gigatons by 2030, and we've actually gone from 33 to 37 gigatons output in the last 3 years. So we're going in the wrong direction. So those are the two realities that we're facing, which is there's tremendous innovation and inspiration and a lot of money going into those. And the reality is that we're not doing enough to bend the curve towards absolute reduction. Most of the additional energy that's been produced through green tech has been additional to the coal-fired and coal-supplied energy. And I think for our brand, that means that we have to think about how do we and our three legs of the stool, our franchisees, our suppliers, and our company, really think about things that we can do that actually in hopefully reduce cost, whether that be through VPPAs, where our France business, 90% of our restaurants in France run on renewable energy. About 75% of our restaurants in the U.S. run on renewable energy. So those are things that can actually, in some ways, at least in the short term, reduce costs. We're piloting a set of restaurant sort of initiatives that will allow a restaurant to invest in new equipment that requires less electricity, and that provides a return in 3 years. So we're piloting that to see actually how much pickup we'll get. But those sorts of initiatives are where we see our opportunity, and working with our suppliers to pilot regenerative agriculture, whether that's rotational grazing or cover crops and the like, to really try to figure out how do we capture more carbon and use our farms and our suppliers' farms as carbon sinks versus carbon emitters. So.
Yeah, and I suspect you have a challenge, and I say this with full transparency. My husband is McCain of McCain chips, so I know a lot about chips. And obviously, the McDonald's French fry, it is known for being very specific. So you have that double challenge of how do you keep providing what your customers are going to expect McDonald's to be, while also piloting kind of new renewables or more renewable, more sustainable, more regenerative agriculture.
Yeah, and I think that consistency is vitally important, right? If you go to a restaurant here in London or you go to one in Berlin, you're going to be able to get the same menu, and it's probably going to taste almost exactly alike.
And you're going to have a French fry with exactly the right density of water to potato.
Yep. And I'm glad you're up on all that. So I think that's the challenge, which is we know that climate change is starting to impact agriculture. It's starting to impact communities. You've got more drought. You've got more floods. You've got erratic weather and severe weather increasing. And so part of this is really the rationale, the business rationale is we want to keep providing the menu we have. And in order to be able to do that for generations to come, we have to start thinking about how do we do it in a more sustainable way. And we know that there are certain things, and McCain is a perfect example. They've developed a regenerative framework that we are piloting, and they are piloting with farmers here in the UK and Ireland. And hopefully that framework provides a framework that can be spread around the world. And the fact is, for those of you who don't know, our supply chain is very local. You hear a lot of talk about tariffs these days. Luckily, our supply chain, whether it's in Europe or 90% of our food ingredients come from Europe. And 100% of our beef in the UK comes from UK farmers and ranchers. So we try to be local for a couple of reasons. One, we want to make sure that our purpose is to feed and foster community. And so how do we do that? Not only in our restaurants and the crew, we have 2 million people who work for McDonald's around the world in our restaurants and our franchisees' restaurants, but also how do we support the local communities from the farmers' perspective. And so in order for us to be able to do that, we have to find ways to grow potatoes more sustainably, use the framework that McCain has developed, and try to spread that to more farms outside of the UK.
How about you? How do you think about this?
Of seeing sustainability.
Yeah, doing well, doing good, do well.
Do well, yes. I work with a lot of clients and on strategizing their sustainability strategy or investment, etc. So I think there's two ways of looking at it. Of course, there's always investment, but the sustainability team actually holds a responsibility really to quantify the quantitative impact of the savings. And we say in our CSO Leaders Club, we say every conversation you have with the CFO or CSO is a business case. You really need to translate your sustainability implementation into a business case in the language they understand and ensure there is a consistent approach over the longer time to track these savings. Sometimes you estimated the savings, but over 5 years, you're not consistently tracking them, and work with your supply chain, work with your suppliers to measure these savings is very vital to get your strategies through. Yeah.
So Nick, do you actually believe that this concept of the triple bottom line, or the way Paul Pullman, 25 years ago talked about kind of a net positive behavior. Do you actually think it's possible from what you can see, what you're experiencing?
Yeah, so I think really we're seeing with a lot of businesses we talk to, and actually the purpose behind us is a real mind shift change. So, sustainability can't be just a value add, something you have and just try and do as an afterthought or a bolt on. It's really about changing it to be woven into the very fabric of your business model and your business. And that's something that actually, we have done ourselves, that we give 10% of all our revenue and invest it across the UK in nature-based projects and habitat restoration. But what we're trying to do is, in a world of increased financial pressures, rather than saying that can actually you stop sustainability, you stop those things because it's a cost base, actually, really it's about can you accelerate those initiatives because they don't just deliver environmental benefits, but first and foremost, there's real financial savings and long-term viability of the company that can be improved. So I think it's not a question of either or and things like that. It's actually how do you bring sustainability more into the business and some of the examples given so it's a core part of your innovation mindset as a whole.
Do you think there's a risk point that so many companies think in the short term, and perhaps there is real investment that has to be made today, tomorrow, even next year to drive some of these sustainability practices, but what they're forgetting is, sure, maybe you're going to feel those pressures for the next 2 to 3 years, but if you don't make change 10 years down the road, you're going to fall behind, or you're not going to have a product. There's going to be no potatoes or no water to run the showers in your 24/7 hotels. Do you see that as a real pain point in why companies are struggling perhaps to embrace the need to invest now?
Well, I think, 10 years in the future is a long time. But what you're already seeing is a lot of consumer pressure. So I think in the UK, there was a recent Nielsen study that 55% of UK consumers say they're actively looking in the last 2 years. They're making sustainability a key part of their purchasing decisions and are thinking about it more. So you have that from consumers, and any business you sell to, and even if you're B2B, they're dealing with consumers at some point. So there's that pressure from consumers. So actually that's happening now. And I think the other lens you can look at is sort of the investor lens. So I think there's a Accenture report that said, I think between 2013 and 2020, businesses that scored really highly on ESG statistics and outperformed by sort of 2.6 times in terms of returns to shareholders than the average, right? So what we've seen, and some of the reasons businesses have started working with us, is that we're an easy way to show that they are committed to ESG and thinking ahead and innovating core parts of their business model, because I think a lot of investors are now using that as a proxy for management teams, seeing that a management team is proactive, is innovative, and is thinking about the long term. So while the immediate business pressures might not always be there, if you look at the sentiments in the wider market from consumers, from the investors that they rely on to sustain the business as well, I think that's making the question of how you become sustainable more pertinent.
Jean, that's a really good transition over. Obviously, you're a consumer and customer-driven business. Do you think that how do you find people responding to the changes you're making? Are they aware of it? Are you feeling the pressure from customers to continue to drive those efforts? Or is it more done for a ability to operate today, tomorrow, and in 10 years is too long a time frame, 5 years from now?
Sure. Well, when we think about all of our sustainability initiatives, there are so many things that nobody sees and so many unsung heroes that might be in the boiler room where the impact of what they're driving is heard in the boardroom. And that was a concept that 20 years ago when I started in this field, the vision was that someday the boiler room would make it to the boardroom. And every quarter when I'm reporting our progress to our board, it's not lost on me that the financial impact of those efforts is, heard loud and clear and respected. Those efforts that happen behind the scenes are often, it may be a quick decision because a chiller might break or a boiler might break, and it's a quick operating decision where we will never compromise the guest experience. Our commitment is to deliver an exceptional guest experience to our guests every time. And when those decisions are made for those big pieces of equipment, for example, those are 30-year decisions. So whatever decision is made on that equipment, those emissions associated with that investment is maintained for 30 years because that's the life of the equipment. In terms of what customers see, business travelers ask, what will my travelers see in their travel journey along the way? For us, a lot of those efforts are those that check three different boxes, whether it's it's got to be a win for our guests, a win for our owners, as well as a win for the environment. So things like using a digital key on your phone through our Hilton app rather than using the plastic key card. That together with everybody that makes that decision to use the digital key saves about 100 tons of plastic away from landfill. So it's a small little thing, but at scale makes a difference. Things like upgrading to LED lighting, where here we take for granted in this part of the world that that's kind of a given, but across 140 countries all over the world, it's not a given. Yet changing a light bulb is the #1 maintenance request across any hotel company. And so it actually adds a lot of value from that perspective. In terms of customer demand, we see a lot of demand from our customers. So a lot of the giants, the consulting firms, the small, medium businesses where they have ambitious sustainability goals. So how do you reduce your own footprint? A big part of that is through your supply chain. And so we are a supplier to all of those companies. And our 2030 emissions reduction targets are validated by the Science Based Targets Initiative. That is often what we see in RFPs from our customers with a wide range of questions about all the different initiatives that we're doing. So for us, we see incredible demand from our customers, also from our investors. So the investor community is very interested in all of the efforts that we're taking to drive forward. So for us, it's about tying back our efforts to the business, those things like the LED lighting, where we're also solving a labor issue, the digital key, where it's a better guest experience rather than fumbling around for a key. Most people are carrying their phone, or bulk amenities. Anybody that has, hair using the small little shampoo bottles to try to squeeze conditioner out, never having the right amount, having the bulk amenities saves costs, saves plastic, is a better guest experience. So some of those guest-facing components are not necessarily the biggest impact efforts from a emissions reduction perspective, but they do make a difference. They engage our customers on our journey. We support them on their journey. And then behind the scenes, there are so many efforts that our unsung heroes are really, inspiring us every day.
John, I want to come back over to you because obviously I was fascinated by the amount of McDonald's restaurants you're saying across France, the US, that are running on renewable energy. And when you're thinking about the customer experience, are you seeing an increased cost for operating these restaurants because you've shifted to renewable energy? And is that getting passed through to customers, or have you found ways to work around that?
Well, I think one of the things we've learned, and it depends in some cases on geography, but by and large, customers are not willing to pay more for sustainability initiatives. Especially in our business where value is such a key part of our brand, value and affordability. And so we have to make sure that whatever we're doing to try to become more sustainable creates some sort of return over some period of time. That's true of VPPAs at the moment. That's true of the restaurant pilots that we're talking about. It's also true that we sort of try to, when we have 2025 packaging goals, we've tried to create a packaging system that really is about fiber, and especially in Europe, 92% of our packaging here, consumer packaging, is paper or certified fiber. So the plastic is really just that liner in the cup when you get a drink, and that I think has contributed to a much lower greenhouse gas emissions for our Europe segment. I think where we have sort of initiatives, you look at in many markets throughout Europe, we're taking the oil from the fries, and we have a supplier who's transitioning that to biofuel. So there are opportunities, what I would call low-hanging fruit, so to speak, where you can do small things, in the restaurant, in a market, in the restaurant that actually can reduce carbon emissions and not add additional costs. We're trying to focus on those areas first, because obviously with all the money flowing into innovation and the amount of green tech money that's coming in, my guess is that in some ways the price of doing green initiatives will start to decrease over time. But obviously we all sort of are mindful that anybody who's dealing with SBTI, we have a 2030 target, we have a 2050 target. So how we kind of try to create a time frame that works to achieve our goals, while taking into account that obviously we're very codependent on society in meeting our goals.
It's actually interesting that you were talking about chips, the chip oil being turned into biofuels, because I had a whole conversation with someone outside about a music festival that was run in Hyde Park solely on that biofuel that came from chip oil.
We got lots of oil. Yeah, we got a lot of
okay.
oil. Yeah.
I want to move over to greenwashing. And obviously, those of you sitting here on this stage are thinking about real sustainability initiatives. But with the pressure coming from consumers, from investors, from your organizations who are trying to accommodate science-based target initiatives, et cetera, what is the risk of greenwashing, and how do you avoid it? Yeah, do you want to give us your thoughts on this?
Yes. First of all, greenwashing, to avoid the risk of greenwashing, is really make sure you incorporate the life thinking approach right from the product design stage, right? And do life cycle approach, incorporate that for every business decision making, and do not always just communicate on the positive impact of a certain implementation. Always consider if it's green, but what about the social impact? Always do a full evaluation and make sure that you bring your consumer along to raise awareness, educate your consumers. The labeling itself, make sure that there's plenty of information is fact-based, scientific-based to provide a full picture of your implementation. And of course, you need to, as brands, as Hilton, of course, the travel industry, food industry, textile industry are being highly scrutinized by regulators for the potential greenwashing of different labeling and claims. EU has done their statistic talking about 59% of the labeling out in the market could be misleading or lack of substantiation. So always make sure that not only when you do the life cycle assessment to begin with, but also when you design a communication package, you always involve subject matter expert, involve your legal team, do not involve sustainability team, do not just rely on commercial teams, right? So everything comes into one picture, is really provide transparency, credibility, and traceability of everything you do. Yeah.
Nick, how would you respond to that? Do you agree? Is there something else you would add on to that?
No, look, I think they're very good points. I agree with them. I think with consumers being more conscious and making more decisions, more educated, what has come a lot is also a high degree of cynicism. I think about claims. I see a lot of people talk to me and, they say like, oh, well, now if I buy a sock or something, it plants a tree, but does it actually? And there's a bit of suspicion, which there probably wasn't a few years ago. So as well as, the only thing I'd add is, as well as real clarity on metrics and that communication, that certification, I think the piece is also how can you make it tangible and relatable and tell a story to your customers. So it's not just about metrics and not just about narrative. How can you marry them up? So you have the scientific factors and you can make it very clear how you're doing it, but you're also explaining what you're doing and why you're doing it in a way that makes sense to your consumers and they can really relate to. We try to do that because all our projects are based in the UK. So our customers, whether it be business or consumer, can actually go and visit the sites they've done. So I think it's really finding that balance between the two.
I know, Jean, you wanted to speak about certifications, but we've gotten an interesting question from the audience about, this is, quote, great to hear the scope 1 and 2 actions, but what can be done to engage your clients in embracing sustainable actions, as this could have a greater impact? And I want to pose that to you. And then if we have a few minutes, we'll come back to the certification question, because I think this is really interesting. You are powerful brands. Hilton, McDonald's. How do you encourage people to come on the journey with you?
So how do we engage our clients, our customers on the sustainable journey? So it's a great question because, as I mentioned before, over half of our business is from business travel and groups. So if you imagine any major corporation that has set ambitious goals, for us, they are specifically looking to partner with suppliers that are fully committed to driving sustainability. So I would say that for us, the population of customers that are demanding this is, we're not trying. For us as a hospitality company, we welcome everybody. We welcome all. So if there are companies that are not bought into this journey, we're not spending our time trying to convince them of this. We're welcoming them and providing an exceptional experience for those customers. And then for our customers that are really leaning into this, for example, we have an offering called Meet with Purpose, which is part of our Travel with Purpose offering. And it has 3 pillars to it. A gather, so how do you gather sustainably? And we have a checklist that has all of these different options that our customers can choose. The second pillar is nourish. So nourishing locally we have carbon labeling, we have low carbon foods, we have a whole menu, and our dedicated chefs are incredibly passionate about bringing food and nutrition to life. And then the third pillar is called impact. And that is where we work with our customers to align on the areas that they are most passionate about. So whether that is, homeless pets, or it's, it could be anything. It could be cancer research, any type of issue that company is passionate about, we will organize an impact activity in the community, connecting with local nonprofits and enabling those meeting attendees to leave that location better because they were there. And so we're really leaning in to try to bring those visions of, advancing on their goals to life by working hand in hand with our customers.
And John, you said before that, your customer base isn't going to accept a higher cost in sustainability, but obviously you are the Golden Arches. The Golden Arches have power. What are you thinking about in terms of how you might be able to encourage your customer base to change their behaviors?
I think this is really, we may be a global brand, but we are very local in every market where we operate. And part of that is, if I'll take Poland, for example, we have a pretty big business in Poland, and our Polish team has figured out a way to make circularity come alive in the restaurant for guest packaging. And they've done a pretty great advertising campaign to basically instruct people how to sort of use different packaging to dispense in different receptacles. And that actually gets recycled and delivered back into the restaurants as paper towels in the restaurants, in the restrooms and in the restaurant. And that has been a great program that they've been able to bring alive and get consumers to come along on the journey. And I think that's based on recycling efforts in Europe that applies. Those customers go home and think about their own home. So I think there's opportunities in certain parts of our business of where there is general sort of interest in sustainability to communicate in a way that is authentic to our brand, that doesn't get into greenwashing, and actually is about something they're actually doing in the restaurant.
Nick, final question around this. What do you think the most effective way to communicate with customers is to get them to come on a sustainability journey?
I think it was touched on by everyone, actually. I think, as Jean said, it's what are they already passionate about, right? You can't teach or force people to be passionate about something they're not passionate about. But actually, there's lots of, sustainability is such a huge topic, and actually it's about the future of our planet, right? And it's the future of our children and grandchildren, right? What you have to do is just find the link in what people care about. And it could be anything. So something, we support is reintroduction of beavers that can actually, so there's been a lot of flooding in the UK, and it can be devastating to communities. And many people, might not be thinking about sustainability in the wider sense, may even be skeptics about the climate and things like that. But they know when their houses are getting flooded, the villages fall up. So actually, if you can talk to them and get them interested through that, we're introducing beavers, it has these benefits and things like that. It's a link in. And so I think, and if you're looking for an effective way, is trying to understand who you're speaking to and don't take a broad brush approach, but find different ways to connect and then tie that into a bigger proposition, a bigger mission and a bigger vision.
Well, with that inspiring ending, thank you so much. And thank you to all of you